I have a small video suggestion. I always thought Saiyan hair didn't grow at all. But recently I came across some videos that say Saiyan hair doesn't change after birth. Therefore, it's possible to argue that once cut, Saiyan hair would grow back to its original shape and length. Does this nuance exist in the original Japanese?
That's a comment I got from one of my recent videos. Thank you, Pepe Morcego. On today's edition of Dragon Ball Dictionary, I'm going to answer that comment by going back to the original Japanese and telling you what Vegeta said in that famous statement that he made about Saiyan hair. And by the way, I already looked at what he said and I discovered something that I'm pretty sure very, very few people have talked about. But you gotta stick around until the end of the video to find out what that is. Hey guys, Tony here. In case this is your first time watching one of my videos, well, I make videos about Dragon Ball, anime localization, and some general anime stuff. But I do it from the perspective of somebody who actually speaks, reads, and writes Japanese, and has experience doing translation and interpretation. And by the way, if I don't always look straight at the camera, it's because I'm legally blind. So sorry about that. I do my best, but I can't really see the camera. So that's why sometimes I might be looking off a little bit. It is what it is, but the content is always the best I can make it. So if you enjoy the content and you want more stuff like what I'm putting out, well, make sure to hit the subscribe button and help me grow the channel. Thanks for all the support, guys. All right, so being that this is a Dragon Ball Dictionary video, of course I'm gonna analyze what Vegeta actually says in that moment where he talks about Saiyan hair. But before I do that, I want to talk about Saiyan hair in general. And I want to do it by exploring some of the things that Toriyama has said about Saiyan hair. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to see if what Toriyama has said in supplemental materials matches up with what Vegeta says in that famous moment from the Cell Saga. So let's begin by going to España. Spain. So here's the thing, there's a magazine that was published in 2008 in Spain called Dragon Ball el Manga Legendario. This translates to Dragon Ball, the legendary manga. This magazine was based on contents produced by Shueisha and its affiliates in 2007. And in this magazine, there's a part where Toriyama talks extensively about Saiyan hair. Unfortunately, though, the original Japanese was never made public, which annoys me to no end because I always like to go to the original Japanese and I make these videos. Thankfully, though, Derek Padula got his hands on Dragon Ball El Manga Legendario, translated the part about Saiyan hair into English, and published it on his website. So a lot of what I'm about to go over comes from Derek's translation. If you want to read the whole thing though, then check out the link down in the description. It's really interesting and definitely worth checking out. Now, normally I wouldn't use a translation of a translation, but it's all we got, so we're just gonna go with it. So there's three main things that Toriyama addresses that I want to cover here. The first of these is, why is Saiyan hair black? The short answer is because Goku's hair is black. You see, when Toriyama designed Raditz, he made Raditz's hair black because he's Goku's brother and Goku has black hair. However, when Toriyama decided to go with black hair for Raditz, that was a one-time decision. It wasn't that he immediately decided, okay, all Saiyans will have black hair. As Toriyama explains in this quote, that wouldn't happen until later.
I remember when I decided about the black hair of the Saiyans. It was right before Vegeta and Nappa showed up.
This quote basically confirms that Toriyama hadn't decided that all Saiyans have black hair until he had already designed Nappa and Vegeta. Maybe it wasn't final designs, but it seems like he was already pretty far along in the design process. To me, at least, it seems really unlikely that Nappa would have ended up with a bald head if Toriyama had already completely fleshed out all the lore behind Saiyan hair. Instead, he probably just decided to make Nappa big and bald because that contrasted really well with short and hairy Vegeta. As for Vegeta, well, this quote by Toriyama also plays into the whole red hair Vegeta thing. Remember, when Vegeta first appears in the Dragon Ball Z anime, he's shown to have red hair. This version of Vegeta is often referred to by fans as Arlia Vegeta. When exactly Toriyama decided that black would be the default hair color for Saiyans, we can't say, but the details here suggest that Toriyama decided very, very late in the game, and that's why Toei didn't know to make Vegeta's hair black. So to sum it all up, Saiyans have black hair because Toriyama gave Raditz black hair because Raditz is Goku's brother, and Goku has black hair. And one more thing about Saiyan hair color. As Paragus proves, it's possible for older Saiyans to get gray hair. Alright, so let's move on to whether Saiyan hair grows. This is what Toriyama said about that.
At one point in the story, Vegeta says a Saiyan's hair never grows. Although, of course, anyone could tell by looking at Raditz that it does. So let's just say that a Saiyan's hair and beard grow slower when compared to Earthlings.
I know Toriyama says here that Vegeta says Saiyan hair doesn't grow. Don't worry about that for now. I will go over what Vegeta actually says later in the video. Basically, the big takeaway here is that, yeah, Saiyan hair does grow. It's just that it grows at a slower rate than that of Earthlings. Now, the funny thing here is that when he designed Raditz, Raditz just had long hair that he grew out. There was nothing special about the hair. But then later on, he retconned the hair because he came up with these explanations for how Saiyan hair behaves. The fact that it doesn't change or it grows very slowly. And here's another interesting thing that we learned from this quote. When Raditz was born, his hair didn't go down to his knees. Now, obviously, when he was a baby, his hair wasn't 4 feet long. I'm talking about longer or shorter proportionally to his body. Take a look at this. Here's Raditz as an adult. You can see that his hair goes roughly down to his knees. Here's a young Raditz from Dragon Ball Super Broly. Take a look at how long his hair is. It doesn't go down to his knees, it goes down to around his butt. This matches up perfectly with what Toriyama said. It seems unlikely that Raditz was cutting his hair at the time, so probably what happened is when he was a baby, his hair was even shorter, maybe down to the bottom of his head or the middle of his back. As he grew older, the hair grew as well. At this point in Dragon Ball Super Broly, it was down to his butt, and by the time he was an adult, it went down to his knees. And given how voluminous Raditz's hair is, it seems that having shorter hair when born is probably a good thing for childbirth. And I'll leave it at that.
Happy birthday!
And then there's a facial hair thing. Yes, Saiyans can grow facial hair. It's just that the facial hair of a Saiyan grows slower than that of an Earthling. So there's absolutely no problem with Nappa's facial hair, Vegeta's facial hair in Dragon Ball GT, and Vegeta's dad's facial hair. And then some of you may remember that time in Dragon Ball Super where Goku and Vegeta show up with full beards and mustaches. In the anime, this happens in episode 32. Goku and Vegeta had just got done training for 3 years in the Room of Spirit and Time. That's 3 days in normal time, but 3 years within the room. So on the surface, that seems to make total sense. Of course, we've seen Goku and Vegeta spend an entire year in the Room of Spirit and Time and not show up with beards and mustaches. So I guess 1 year isn't enough for a Saiyan to grow a full beard and mustache, but 3 years is? There's a lot I can criticize about Dragon Ball Super, but I guess I can't criticize this because it actually fits with what Toriyama says about Saiyan facial hair. Alright, so let's move on to the next topic. Do Saiyans go bald, and is Nappa bald? Well, let's see what Toriyama has to say about that.
By the way, Nappa didn't have hair on his head. But it's not because he was bald, but rather he had shaved his hair as a test of courage and with a defiant attitude. Saiyans can also suffer from alopecia.
The important takeaway here is that Nappa wasn't bald. He shaved his head And apparently within Saiyan society, shaving your head is a sign of bravery and that you have some kind of defiant attitude. I suspect that what he means by a defiant attitude is not that he was rebelling against King Vegeta, but rather that he was like a tough warrior and he wanted to show that by shaving his head. Now that parenthetical in the quote suggests that Saiyan hair has some kind of defensive properties, so I guess you could say that this probably confirms that Saiyan hair tends to be stiffer than Earthling hair, because let's face it, Earthling hair isn't all that protective. And that's why you should always wear a helmet when you ride a bicycle.
Hey, helmet boy, my sister's got a helmet like that. Maybe you should wear a dress just like her.
But seriously though, if Saiyan hair is stiffer and maybe even thicker, this works really well with the idea that Saiyan hair doesn't change. Because if that's the case, then obviously Saiyan hair would be far more prone to just staying in one shape, and it would be much more difficult to style it.
Oh, damn it.
And in theory, stiffer hair could also mesh really well with the idea that Saiyan hair grows very slowly. Did Toriyama do this on purpose? No, I think it's pretty clear that he came up with a lot of this after the fact, but it works really well, so good job, Toriyama. But when it comes to Saiyans and baldness, there's one more thing I have to point out, and that is what Toriyama said in 2009 in the Dragon Ball Super Exciting Guide. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find the original Japanese of this interview, but Kanzenshu did have an English translation, and Kanzenshu is a reliable source, so we'll go with it.
It's not that their hairstyle never changes. Nappa was bald after all. The states of Saiyan hair are also the same as Earthlings. Its properties are just a little bit different.
So in this quote, Toriyama seems to contradict what he said about 2 years earlier. Remember, Toriyama had said that Nappa shaved his head, but here he seems to suggest that Nappa went bald. So, perhaps Toriyama forgot what he said in 2007? Totally possible. Or maybe he lost his hair after he began shaving his head. Now look, I'm not going to get into a whole discussion about what's canon in Dragon Ball, but Nappa is shown to have hair in the Bardock TV special and the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie. So that means that at some point after Goku was born, either he went bald or he started shaving his head and then he went bald. For now though, that's all we know, and I think there's a pretty good chance that we'll never truly know what happened to Nappa's hair. Anyway, in the rest of the quote, Toriyama seems to suggest that just like Earthlings, there is variation among Saiyan hair. Of course, we have Raditz, whose hair seems to have grown significantly over the course of his life. And then we have the Saiyans who go bald, and, well, Nappa might fall under that category. But Toriyama also makes it clear that Saiyan hair has slightly different properties than that of Earthlings.
Nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know.
They're gonna know.
How would they know?
Now, just to go back to that point about how there's variation among Saiyan hair, well, that might also apply to Goku. In case you forgot or you just didn't know, at the beginning of Dragon Ball, Goku's hairstyle looks a bit different from the iconic hairstyle that we all know today. As far as I know, Akira Toriyama never made any public statements about why exactly he tweaked Goku's hairstyle from what we see at the beginning of Dragon Ball to what we eventually would come to know as the Goku hairstyle. But I don't think it's that hard to explain. It's well known that Toriyama loved to simplify his designs as much as possible to make it as easy as possible to draw repeatedly. And of course, he was always thinking about how to make a design pop, how to make something instantly recognizable. So probably what happened is, over the course of him drawing Goku again and again and again, he ended up refining the hairstyle into what it would eventually become.
Now, early Goku has kind of what I call Wolverine hair. It sort of is more flat on top and symmetrically spiked on either side. But when Toriyama would draw profiles of Goku, he would draw the hair in a slightly different shape. And as time went on, that shape kind of grew into the standard shape. And so what you see here is kind of the end result of that decade of work.
And the final version that we have today is extremely stylized.
An important thing to remember is if you can kind of master this style, this particular series of spikes, it works for both dead-on Goku, three-quarter Goku, and full-profile Goku. Because, again, Goku's hair is meant to kind of be like Mickey Mouse's ears. It's supposed to be the same and recognizable from any angle.
So that's the out-of-universe explanation. What about in-universe? Remember, when Goku is shown as a baby, he's got the iconic Goku hairstyle. But then, at some point, it changes to what we see in early Dragon Ball, and then, eventually, it changes back into the iconic Goku hairstyle. So what's going on here?
Well, we never get any lines in the manga specifically about the evolution of Goku's hair, but we can use Toriyama's words to explain this. Toriyama flat out denies the idea that a Saiyan's hairstyle never changes, which means that it's totally possible for the hairstyle of at least some Saiyans to change in the way that Goku's did.
Am I thinking way too deeply about this? Absolutely! But that's also exactly why you watch videos like this, so you're welcome.
はい、これでまずは通常時の悟空の髪型が完成です。3D で配置しているので、角度によって毛束の本数が増えたり減ったりしますね。
As for Super Saiyan hair, I don't think Toriyama has ever talked extensively about Super Saiyan hair. The most notable thing Toriyama ever said about Super Saiyan hair is probably the thing about how Toriyama decided to make it gold or yellow because you already know, right? He didn't have to color in the hair anymore if he did that, and that saved him time and energy. But here's a couple more things that crossed my mind while thinking about this. First of all, Super Saiyan 1 and Super Saiyan 2. The hair goes up, right? Does that mean that it gets even stiffer than regular Saiyan hair? Maybe. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And then there's Super Saiyan 3. Given that Saiyan hair grows so slowly, Super Saiyan 3 really is bizarre. We have tons of hair just growing within the matter of what, like a second or two? I'm 100% sure that Toriyama never thought of this, but the fact that turning Super Saiyan 3 involves growing a whole lot of hair extremely rapidly is a great symbol for this transformation, because this is an extremely taxing transformation. In a way, you could even say that Super Saiyan 3 is unnatural. Just like growing a whole bunch of hair extremely quickly is to a Saiyan. How do you like that interpretation? Let me know down in the comments. And then there's the whole eyebrows thing. Where do they go? Do they fall off? Or do they go back in the body? No idea. But then there's Ozaru. Hair grows really quickly all over the body. Seems like that would be unnatural, but I guess you could make the argument that the Ozaru in a way is tapping into their true nature. So actually they used to be hairier, but then as they evolved, they lost the hair? Thoughts down below. And then there's Super Saiyan 4, and I'm not even going to talk about that. The reality is that what we're talking about here is base form Saiyan hair. When it comes to transformations though, I think it's a lot more difficult to make sense of all of it and have it all click neatly. But if you can do that, again, drop it down in the comments.
No, 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 no.
Alright, the time has finally come to analyze what Vegeta says about Saiyan hair. But before we do that, I need to tell you something. I'm really trying to grow this channel, but I'm not trying to grow it at Saiyan hair growth speed. I'm trying to grow it at Earthling hair growth speed. So help me make that happen. Hit the subscribe button and how about dropping a like? Vegeta's famous hairline, and no, I'm not talking about his actual Dracula hairline. I'm talking about the thing that he says about Saiyan hair, happens in episode 154 of Dragon Ball Z during the Cell Saga. The scene takes place at Kami's lookout, and the sequence starts when Bulma notices that Trunks' hair has grown significantly since the last time she saw him. This is because Trunks and Vegeta just got done spending a day in the Room of Spirit and Time, which of course translates to an entire year for them. So naturally, over the course of that year, Trunks' hair has grown longer. After Bulma learns this, she turns to Vegeta and asks, "What's up with your hair? Why isn't it any longer?" I need to point out something here really quickly. This moment strongly suggests that at this point in the story, Bulma and Vegeta don't really know much about each other. You would think that Bulma would know something basic like that about Vegeta. I mean, if your boyfriend or girlfriend was an alien, you would probably ask him, so, what's it like being a Saiyan? What's different about being a Saiyan? What was it like on your home planet? Etc., etc. But apparently Bulma and Vegeta never talked about this kind of stuff, despite the fact that they had already had a baby together. Anyway, now we're finally at the point where Vegeta says the thing about Saiyan hair. But before I show you my translation, let's take a look at how the English dub handled this line.
Holy Cosmos, look at that thing!
Holy Cosmos, I messed up. Let's try that one again.
For your information, a pure Saiyan's hair does not change from the day that he is born.
There we go. So is this accurate? Yeah, it is. Except for one thing. The English dub left out something. So here's my translation. From the time they are born, the hair of a pure Saiyan does not change in any creepy ways. Obviously, the English dub left out the part about hair changing in creepy ways. In the original Japanese, the key word that Vegeta says here is bukimi. Bukimi means creepy, weird, eerie, strange. If you add a ni onto bukimi, then it becomes an adverb, and so we end up with the whole hair changing in creepy ways thing that I said in my translation. The word bukimi is vague and extremely subjective. What is bukimi to you is not necessarily bukimi to me. In other words, what is weird to you may not be weird to me. Now, I am going to say more about this interesting word choice of using bukimi here. But what I want to focus on first here is the essence of what Vegeta is saying. Basically, he's saying Saiyan hair doesn't change in any massive ways. I can't overemphasize enough here. Vegeta is not saying Saiyan hair never changes. That is an absolute statement, but Saiyan hair doesn't change in any weird ways is a much more nuanced statement. And by the way, this statement does not apply whatsoever to facial hair, body hair, tail hair, or any other kind of hair. It only applies to the hair on your head. That's because in the anime, Vegeta uses the word kaminoke. Kaminoke is a word used exclusively for the hair on your head. And in the manga, Vegeta says essentially the same thing. There's a couple of negligible differences. The only one that is relevant to us right now is the fact that in the manga, Vegeta uses the word tohatsu to refer to the hair on your head rather than kaminoke. Tohatsu is basically a more bookish or formal sounding word for kaminoke. So let's wrap this all up. Vegeta's statement is totally in line with the statements by Toriyama that I've shown you in this video. Vegeta does not say Saiyan hair never changes, and he doesn't say Saiyan hair doesn't grow. His statement completely leaves the door open for both things. It's just that if Saiyan hair grows, it would have to grow much more slowly than that of Earthlings in order for Vegeta's statement to make sense. And if a Saiyan's hairstyle does change for some reason, as long as it doesn't change massively, it still makes sense with what Vegeta said. And even if we disregard everything Toriyama said, simple logic proves that Saiyan hair does grow. And I'm not just talking about Raditz here, I'm talking about pure Saiyans in general. Think about this, when Saiyans are born, they're babies, and babies are smaller than adults. As a baby matures, their body grows. But if their hair didn't grow by the time they're an adult, they would probably look kinda ridiculous because it wouldn't match up proportionally. If you take baby Goku's hair and you place it on adult Goku's head, or vice versa, it's gonna look weird. Which means Saiyan hair has to keep growing, albeit extremely slowly, until a Saiyan reaches adulthood. After that, the evidence suggests that a Saiyan hair stops growing. In other words, once the hair reaches its final adult length, that's it. it shuts down. Or I guess it's also possible that it's still growing, it's just growing so extremely slowly that there's no noticeable difference even after decades. It's so crazy to me that after so many years, there's still tons of people in the English-speaking Dragon Ball fandom that claim Vegeta said Saiyan hair never changes.
Saiyan hair never grows or changes after birth.
According to Vegeta, a pure-blooded Saiyan's hair never grows. And I'm not gonna get into the logistics about how, Saiyans don't change their hair from birth. It stays the same. Clearly, that is not applicable to the series at this point, and it's probably something we should all forget about, because that line does not matter whatsoever anymore.
I can only assume that the way the English dub handled this translation is a huge reason for this widespread misunderstanding about what Vegeta says here. So if you ever come across somebody claiming that Vegeta said Saiyan hair never changes or it never grows, now you can tell them what Vegeta says in this moment is, from the time they are born, the hair of a pure Saiyan does not change in any creepy ways. And you can give them a link to this video, but I highly recommend that you provide a timestamp for the part where I actually start talking about the thing Vegeta says about Saiyan hair, because this is a ridiculously long video. As for whether Saiyan hair grows back to its original shape and length if cut, there's no reason to think it wouldn't. Now, how long would it take to grow back? I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say it would grow back slower than that of an Earthling. But of course, you also got to keep in mind that Dragon Ball is a fictional universe, and the corporate interests that control it can decide anything at any moment. And by the way, I got to mention this, otherwise people in the comments are going to say I forgot. Everything seems to indicate that Dragon Ball GT Vegeta cut his hair. And if that's the case, I think it's a great symbolic choice. It's just one more thing that indicates how he's adapted to life on Earth. He's taken on Earthling customs, and one of them is cutting his hair. But if for the sake of argument, it turns out that Dragon Ball GT Vegeta didn't cut his hair, I would say that's too massive of a change. The outline of the hair is completely different. So to me, that would conflict with what Vegeta from the Cell Saga said. And so I think that if Cell Saga Vegeta saw himself in GT, he would describe that change as Bukimi.
ということで、孫悟空になってみました。
Alright, so now I can finally talk about that thing that I noticed that I'm not sure anybody else has really thought about. You see, to Vegeta and to your average Saiyan, hair growing as quickly as Trunks' did is weird. It's significant that Vegeta used the word Bukimi, a word that means creepy, eerie, weird, instead of something like extreme or great, something more objective. The first time Vegeta realized that Earthling hair grew significantly faster than that of Saiyans probably was a significant culture shock moment for him. But isn't it hilarious that Vegeta ends up with Bulma, the character known for having the most numerous and radical hairstyle changes in the Dragon Ball franchise? To a Saiyan, the way in which Bulma constantly is changing her hair is bizarre. And yet, Vegeta ended up, well, not just marrying Bulma, well, you know, he got her pregnant. So after I realized this, the thought struck me, instead of being creeped out by Bulma's hair, like some other Saiyans would, maybe he developed a liking for it. I, Vegeta, Prince of the Saiyans, humbly request that you, Bulma, let me touch your hair. Oh, it's so pliable. Oh, yes, yes, yes! Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Seriously though, thank you so much for watching. Originally, I was thinking this would be like an 8-minute video, but nope, well over 20 minutes. So thank you so much to Pepe Morcego for the awesome suggestion. This was a great topic. Hopefully I was able to cover all the main stuff, but there's a chance I forgot something or totally missed something. So if that's the case, let me know down in the comments. And if you have other ideas for videos, again, let me know down in the comments. By the way, if you want to support what I do, consider picking up one of my t-shirts over here, mekanekosushi.com. And if you want more content like this, don't forget to subscribe and check out the playlist that you see on screen right now. More Dragon Ball Dictionary videos in that playlist. See you in the next one.